Hello and welcome esteemed guests. Now prepare yourself for the
second
annual Movies of 20 whatever year this is video. Now brace yourself, what you are about to see is from memory and
slight scripting.
So don't worry about pauses, mild confusion, buts, and such. Now, it's time to relax, get comfy with some drinks and let's talk about movies from 2020 for over an hour.
Hey everyone, welcome to the newest best of the year list video. This is a long time. I know it seems like they're all coming out at this point of the year, but I try to watch as many as I can before I make this because sometimes I'll miss out on a movie. I'm like, hey, I want to watch this and I won't have the time, so I try to put it aside for as long as I can so I can catch up on all of them. But unfortunately, because of a lot of stuff that's going on, I can't sit down and watch a whole lot of movies. And I kept trying to. So unfortunately, some movies I wanted to watch, like Kajillionaire, which I might still do before I finish this. I still wanted to check out movies like that, but I just need to finish it, and I already have thoughts out about a lot of these, and I just want to get it out, and counts as a school project technically. So yeah, this year was absolute ass. This was a horrible year for a wide variety of reasons. It was we don't even need to explain why. It was just such a god-awful year. And from there was just a lot of just upsetting days, horrible days where you just felt not even blue, but worse. But luckily, the medium of film was able to kind of help make it slightly more tolerable and keep it slightly more engaging with more stuff coming out. And I'm happy that I was able to find a good variety of films. The joke is like, oh, Sonic was the only movie that came out this year, but I don't think so. If you actually explored the depths of all the content that's out, you would find that there's a lot of great movies coming out, and these are among the best that I happen to watch this year. Here is the 20 to 11 of the best of the year, and I have a Google Docs somewhere in the description where you can read like what I said about those ones. But we're just gonna kick it off. We're just gonna kick it off with the top 10 of 2020. Oh yeah, sorry if I look at this while I'm talking about it. These are all the notes of the movie since like from like January to March. So if you see me looking at what I'm writing, don't mind it at all. I'm just trying to remember everything I wrote about the film. Sorry I can't remember everything about the SpongeBob movie or Wonder Woman 1984. Sorry I have to look at my notes so I can remember what I thought about it. Starting at the top 10 of the year, I just gotta admit, I wasn't aware of this film's existence about a month or two after its release, due to my lack of enjoyment due to the star's previous works. But I found that Big Time Adolescence by Jason Orley was an incredibly engaging, emotionally moving look into basically the high school past. What really does help this film is its lead performances by Griffin Gluck and Pete Davidson. The chemistry they have and the separate ways they portray their characters is honestly very realistic, amusing, and pretty heartfelt. It's acted out in a specific way that really does make them seem real and come to life. Like, I knew people who acted in similar way to these characters just from a few years ago. And it does utilize one of my favorite, and I barely ever brag or praise this, but it has some great use of camera focus, especially towards the end of the film. Really just kind of, not digging a heart, but really just letting it all go out. You can tell this was a very personal and well-researched film that respects the audience and characters to make them real and remind you and kind of showcase what that time of high school was/is like. It's very good, very funny. I really would recommend it. It was much better than I thought it was going to be. While my number one film of the year is my favorite human film of the year, I would have to say that Nomadland by Chloe Zhao is probably the second best version of this idea of a human film that came out within that year. This film completely transcends itself into feeling like it's a person whose journey you are following, and yes, that is what a story in a film is, but this is one of the few movies where it completely fits the former statement in the best way possible. This film feels like a documentary in the way it's edited and kind of paced out. Plus, the conversations that Fern has with many people feel legitimately genuine. You can actually feel a lot of the pain and emotion behind everything they're saying. The simple journey that Fern goes on while traveling state to state is heavily captivating, boosted to beyond the moon by Frances McDormand's spectacular performance. Honestly, this is within my top 5 or even 3 performances of hers. The subtleties and craft she brings to her character makes this one of my top 3 favorite performances of the year, filled with visually pleasing sequences with great steady cam shots that really does make you feel kind of like you're walking and seeing the environments, kind of like a VR simulator, if that makes any sense. And a score that I do think you can say is cheesy, but I feel as though it was performed and used so sporadically and utilized well enough that I really don't have a complaint or any issues with it whatsoever. And plus the editing by Chloe Zhao is really methodical, gives out a really lovely smooth pace that I didn't really find myself bored whenever I watch it. The complete artistic integrity and control that Chloe Zhao has over this is incredibly terrific, and I really do feel as though it's beyond one of the most wonderful, solid, incredibly good films of the year. I don't know, it may be worth watching on your iPhone if you got the chance. Now, I wasn't aware of this film's existence till about, I think it was a year before it came out, mainly due to my lack of enjoyment of the previous star's films. So I was incredibly and pleasantly surprised that King of Staten Island by Judd Apatow was an incredibly funny, wonderful piece of self-reflection by the film's co-writer and star, Pete Davidson. He based over 70% of the film off his own life experiences, and you can kind of tell that a lot of this was very personal, and a lot of that. I do like films about almost semi-biographical films. They always captivate me in always interesting ways, and seeing how their past kind of influences them now and what brought them to this point. And this one actually does feel very moving, and one of the more better ones of the past few years, I would have to say. The way it's all presented really does help ground the film and make it more personal than most of them out there, in my opinion. The way Pete Davidson plays his character is very intriguing, and his story of learning what he wants to do and trying to value the many things he has in his life after he lost the most important figure in his life makes for an interesting and personal journey. His change and development throughout the course of the film is an emotionally engaging and pretty terrific, as it is something that most people can understand and something some people have gone through. So to see him try to understand better makes for an intriguing journey that is ultimately satisfying by the end. The main and side performances I think are pretty great, especially from Davidson and Bill Burr. They both have really good chemistry. They're both funny and perform in just such a unique, lovely little way that it just captivates you throughout the whole 2 hour and 2 hour and 20 minute runtime. It really does come with really solid editing and pacing that this film flies by its 2 hour and 18 minute runtime. It does not feel that long to me. I would say any issues would have to go towards the photography at the beginning. The way some scenes are lit and focused are just odd, and it kind of takes you out of the movie for a bit. But that's within the first half hour, I think it doesn't really bother me after a while. Now, I'd also have to say the film feels like it ends 3 different times, but each one does serve a purpose, and I would have to say that it is ultimately satisfying, and it just kind of is this is a nice continuing conclusion for this film. My many praises, plus the humor and heart that the film brings, makes this an engaging, funny, and pretty heartfelt look into this man's life and change that I think I'll see myself coming back to, and hopefully you check out. Now, it's incredibly unfortunate that this film's distribution was completely botched. Nobody knew about it. It was pumped and dumped in theaters for a week. And it's unfortunate because I really do feel as though The Empty Man by David Pryor would have been a landmark horror achievement for a big studio film. It's a slow, patient detective story with so much setup and wonderful payoffs that I was absolutely blown away by this. I remember the runtime kind of turning me off, but after the first 25 minutes, I was completely on board. And by the time an hour and a half goes by, you don't notice because the film paces itself out so well and keeps you so hooked that with this guy trying to find out what happened to this girl, you can't help but keep yourself interested and not look away. Plus, I really do love detective films. One of my favorite ones was The Kid Detective, which I think it may come into the top 10 at some point in some time, but this film is also what I'm looking for within a detective film. And plus, this film actually plots itself with great intrigue and mystery that you actually feel you're along with this guy and with it, instead of the whole mystery and intrigue being insisted. It has a genuinely thrilling and truly scary moments, especially during that forest scene. I found myself being captivated by what I was seeing and really feeling by the whole thing. And it all culminates in a really tense conclusion with a pretty intriguing and actually effective twist that I found it to work really well with this film. Accompanied by a pretty effective and terrific score, cinematography, and editing, this film is greatly overlooked and is actually something I think more people and a lot of people would get a lot out of had they known about it. It's incredibly entertaining, really different from the vast majority of horror movies out there, and is a great one I would recommend. It's still on HBO Max as I record and edit this, so hopefully it's still out when I get this out. It is not for everyone, it makes sense, but I just found myself being intrigued, captivated, and hopefully the same happens for you when you check it out. I would say the film that I'm going to talk about 2 spaces from now deals with a lot of these issues much better, but I found that Palm Springs by Max Barbakow was a really entertaining, fun look into finding like purpose and value and meaning in life. It's an exceptionally funny, heartfelt, subversive rom-com, time loop-com that utilizes the generic romantic comedy genre and time loop concept and uses it to show the development of Niles going from a nihilistic person who has given up on life, seeing it as something with no purpose, to finding someone important and realizing life really is worth giving a care about. This unique approach really does make it captivating start to end, and you really have a great chemistry and performances from the 2 main leads of Andy Samberg and Kristen Milloli. I believe that's how you say your name? Sorry if I butchered it. But the characters are very well performed and well developed. And I think its story is great, and it leads to many like genuinely entertaining and fun sequences of them just kind of messing around with time. That's always fun thing with a lot of these time loop films. And this one utilizes in a very fun way and actually thematically purposeful. I should also mention how visually pleasing the cinematography looks. It really does capture the aesthetic of summer and the fun, cool, welcoming colors of the locations and feel of summer. And great uses of music and editing that brought levity to many scenes and really did help out the message and fun adventure that I really don't mind ever watching because it's just so good. It's really entertaining, actually has a message. I like when comedy films do have some sort of an idea or a message and you have a lot going for it that makes it effective. It's probably the best comedy film that came out last year, and it's just one I highly recommend. One that I really didn't know too much about, but it hit me more than I thought it was going to when I went in, was most definitely Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always by Eliza Hattman. It's an absolute masterclass in saying so much by saying very little at the same time. We don't really see or know who had gotten Autumn pregnant, and nor is it really important to the overall story or narrative. All that matters is she has her operation and be done with it. And how far she has to go to make a decision and do something like what she has to do is actually quite frightening, sad, and just heartbreakingly honest. And really something that nobody should just go through, especially in the way that you see it throughout the film. The claustrophobic framing and editing really do help make this feel a bit more horror than you would think, with terrific performances from everyone that truly do make this the best performed film of the year. The way each person's like mannerisms and little movements to how they speak and talk really do give them a great sense of character that you completely understand how they work, how they operate, how they are, even if they don't say or show too much from that. And especially in the way they kind of reflect like positivity, negativity, lack of an intrigue. It really does just make you really hit you and remind you like, wow, people can perform in this way that it just blows you away. This is really just a terrific film that I really do think everyone and a lot of people should check out. Hard to watch and brutal, but ultimately purposeful, intriguing, and quite honestly moving by the very end and the last frame. Now, many films and shows have tried to tackle this idea of what the purpose and meaning of life is, and while I haven't seen every movie ever, I don't see foreign French films or every single movie ever, even though I would like to, at this moment, at the time of recording, and it could change, I feel as though Soul by Pete Docter and Ken Powers is one of the closest, and maybe the closest we're ever going to get to answering this question of, like, what's the meaning and purpose in life? The spiritual journey Joe Gardner goes on is really something I find to be mostly relatable and incredibly engrossing. Joe's struggle with seeing his life as meaningless until he gets the gig is something that most of us have gone through. So for him to go on a journey with 22 to simultaneously reflect and ignore the many simple elements of life, which leads to a revelation that one spark isn't a person's purpose, but one piece of a bigger puzzle within someone's life. As well as 22's arc of deeming life as pointless and meaningless, wanting nothing to do with it, to experiencing it and seeing that it is worth living beyond fantastic and ultimately satisfying. While the film does establish rules and it does do some things that you can kind of question, like what about this, what about that, I feel as though the film establishes them well enough and follows them well enough that keeps you engrossed within its story, that it doesn't really bother you, nor it didn't bother me per se. I really didn't mind it. I stood forward with the story and overall message, and it will accompany with the terrific imagery and world that Pixar and the team have created. This is a masterfully gorgeous looking movie. The textures, the background, the lighting, the character designs, it's all just so unique and incredible that I'm in awe. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. This is like what I'm looking for within mainstream animation. And plus, accompanied with the fantastic metaphysical music from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, and the jazz compositions from John Baptiste that bring strong energy and emotion to each scene that accompanies it, is beyond wonderful. Especially the track Epiphany, that brings together the scene and the emotions that made me feel a euphoric emotion and truly understand the film. It's probably my favorite score, and that's definitely like my favorite piece of music from a film from last year. It starts and ends strong and is something that is genuinely getting better and more thought-provoking and profound the more it sticks with me. I'm recording this almost a year after it came out, and I'm still thinking about it like this time later. It's beyond incredible. I wouldn't really have an issue if someone views this as the best like animated or just regular film of the year. It's super well profound and terrific that I love it a lot. I wouldn't have an objection with anyone's opinion on it, because this is a film that's just terrific for basically everyone, and something that I'm going to always see myself coming back to. Oh yeah, massive spoilers for this next one. Just know that this one is incredibly terrific and engaging, but really like just confusing and slightly dumbfounding, but ultimately purposeful and wonderful. So skip this if you don't want to be spoiled, but yeah. Now, if I'm going to be honest, I almost kind of disliked this film when I first watched it, and I got some of it when I first watched it. But after letting it like sit for a while, and after hearing a lot of people's interpretations of it, I really do think I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Charlie Kaufman is an incredibly bizarre, wonderful masterpiece. It's bizarre, patient, loving, and ultimately like existential in everything it shows. It's a cinematic puzzle with no clear picture that you only get few pieces over time, and with the empty little spaces you have, you kind of fill out the rest of it, if that really makes any sense. And with these pieces, and even though you don't have it pieced together within a first sitting, it takes many viewings to get an idea of what's happening, and just to find out the basic idea behind it really makes this the most disturbing and horrifying, bleak film about being alone this year. The idea that this janitor has become so lonely and paranoid of such, he imagines and fabricates this idea that he is traveling with this woman to go meet his parents, only for her to live his life and question what is going on, to seeing all of the little clues and media sprinkled throughout the film, shows just how this man was so lonely and miserable that he used media as a way to fill the empty holes in his life. It's beyond upsetting, horrifying, and it's just the terrific trademark existential commentary that Charlie Kaufman is known for and amazing at. Similar to Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, everyone's performance is beyond incredible. This is the second best acted film of the year. Just the many intricacies, movements, mannerisms of how a character speaks, how they change throughout the whole film is incredibly engaging and quite like eye-opening. Jessie Buckley. There's a whole moment where she like just changes an accent and is quoting a Pauline Kael review. You're like, what? Where's this going? And then you kind of realize Like, it's this guy's idea of how he's meant to kind of perceive and believe this film that they're talking about, as opposed to what he sees and believes in the film. The production design, the makeup, the editing, effects, and especially the presentation of the 4:3 aspect ratio is really incredibly purposeful, well used, really does add to the claustrophobic, empty and bleak feel that this film brings. This film would just not be as hard-hitting or impactful if that wasn't in the film. The use of certain songs from Oklahoma is terrifically used in many scenes, and especially the ending play that just left me floored once it ended. The changing music from Jay Wadley is beyond fantastic, going from a wonderful, majestic world-building tune to an eerie sense of dread and misery, finishing with a terrific dance ballad, and that, with the music, perfectly sums up the movie in the most precise and intricate way possible. It's a truly outstanding film that I really did love, and not everyone's gonna love it, and I completely understand that. And while I do have much more to say and feel about this film, others have said more and better than I think I have, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't check it out and see what you think, because this is only what I found from the film. I loved it a lot. It's flippin' terrifying, sad, but you know, it's just what I needed. It was one of those films that you kind of needed, the perfectly bleak, sad film within a perfectly sad, bleak time in our lives. A truly dark, bleak, but really hilarious and legitimately like uplifting, pleasant surprise that I was not expecting at all or even knew about during this year was most definitely Feels Good Man by Arthur Jones. It's a thoroughly well-researched documentary about the most infamous meme of all time, Pepe the Frog. Sounds lame and weird in theory, but as the film goes on, you really do see why this exists. It's a look into what manipulation and a lack of control can do to art, and how it goes from one thing to being how it's like sweet and innocent to this dark, unrecognizable form of what it once was. Makes for an incredibly investing and ultimately upsetting viewing experience. I was always aware of the Pepe stuff, and I never really, I would remember being like, well, why is this little figure in the ADL? But this film really does take its time and establish why and how it became what it was, and why it's now in that, in a way that I never knew or actually tried to look into why that was. And it's just incredibly upsetting, horrible, and really I found myself being affected by. It's a great look into just examining the internet and how dark and horrible it can be. It's fantastically edited with great music, pacing, and a true understanding of how the internet and meme culture works is what makes the editing and just truly the best part of the movie. And plus it has great visual presentation that goes from the interview pieces to kind of art demonstrations that keeps it a visually interesting film from start to end. And while it is a really upsetting and bleak film, it does come with a legitimately uplifting and emotionally really well done ending that really does give a sense of hope and fulfillment of, can things change? Can it be how it once was? Or will it always be how it's now is? This is a truly great documentary that has genuinely become one of my favorites documentaries at this point. This is totally what I'm looking for in a film in terms of subject matter and presentation, and I'm always going to see myself coming back to you, and I'm just blown away that not only this exists, but it works as well as it does. Now here it is, the number one of the year. And now I'm gonna have to be honest with you all. With all these films, and especially the whole list of of the movies I saw last year, it felt more so a best to worst in terms of quality of what I watched, as opposed to favorite of most favorite to least favorite. I wasn't really finding myself gravitating or truly finding myself loving this really a whole lot, of course with a few exceptions, but other than that it was just hard to really find some that actually got to me and really affected me. But that all changed on December 11th of last year when I sat down and I watched Wolfwalkers by Tom Moore and Ross Stewart. It was a kind of a transcendent experience. This film is, without exaggeration, one of my favorite animated movies of all time. This film managed to do what no other animated film this year did, and that was tell a unique, beautiful story that utilized its form of animation to the fullest. The animation here is some of the best I've ever seen. The style, movements, lighting, shot composition, backgrounds, and character designs are all so unique and perfectly used that I'm in awe whenever I watch it. And the same goes with the actual characters as well. Our lead, Robin, and how she goes from this like hunter with a desire to hunt and kill, even kind of dressed in the shape of an arrow, to becoming more of a free spirit, open, loving, and protecting and feeling and helping a community that was marginalized, is something so transparent and like wonderful that I'm in awe. Like, whoa, this is all incredible. I truly love it, and nothing else in the film captures that more than the running with the wolves scene. My favorite scene from a movie this year, and one of my favorite scenes of the past decade, which has our lead finally learn and embrace her true self with great animation and an amazing use of Running with the Wolves by Aurora. But God, it's just so satisfying and just so relieving and good, and the way the film keeps going from there is amazing, building tension and heartbreak that leaves you caring and what is going to happen next. And great action scenes too that have a terrific purpose with each individual scene, and each one of them really does help raise the stakes in ways that is actually effective and has you going, with terrific thematic aspect ratio changes. And while they're kind of sporadic and I wish they did that a little bit more, they're so perfectly used towards the end that I'm like, I find myself breathless when I watch it. And that never happens to me. That's rarely happened to me when I watch a film. This film really did hit me harder than any other film I saw this year. I rarely cry during movies, so whenever I see something that makes me feel genuine emotion and makes me cry every time I watch it, I know that this film is exceptional and succeeded in every way possible. I'm so happy that I was like able to like sense and feel actual emotions when watching a film, and especially just in terms in general, and actually kind of feel and embrace like positive and wonderful emotions of thought and care, especially when days were just downright bleak and depressing. And if I'm going to be honest, this was the film that made me fall in love with animation again, and as well as cinema again, after an incredibly mediocre year of films and just a horrible year too. This was the film that I'm like, damn, this is like just gonna stick with me for a long time. It's been almost a year since I first watched it, and it's still just like left a mark on me, and I just keep thinking about it, and it's just so wonderful. I love when movies do that. I love when you can just look back on a film or anything and just feel a great sense of emotion from it. I do kind of have much more to say. I may talk about it at some point in the future, but just as is and how I'm discussing it right now, I think this is an incredibly wonderful, kind of perfect little masterpiece that I'm incredibly happy that it came out. I was able to watch and feel and just feel. Just feel. I feel like that was the biggest takeaway I got from it, was to just feel something. And that's it. That's the top 10 of last year. I would like to have talked about 20, but I need to condense it a little bit. But I do have a link below of a Google Doc what I have to say about the other 9 that I wasn't able to talk about, but I really did like them as well. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you like it. I hope you watch all these films in some way. You may have seen a couple of them, but yeah. So stay on board. Most likely by this time next year, I'm going to talk about my top 10 of 2021. And I already know, and if you follow me on Letterboxd or Twitter or anything, I think you know what my number 1 of next year is going to be. And I don't think any other, one film was close to beating it, but I'm happy. 2021 feels like the rebirth of cinema. Wolf Walkers was that seed planted for a terrific rebirth of cinema for the next year. So yeah, make sure to follow the Letterboxd, make sure to follow the Instagram, the Twitter, whatever platform you use. I'm most likely on it. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked it, and I hope you find something from these films, because they were great. I liked them. Thanks.